You know, he's really, he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the Getting Lit podcast. Last episode, we talked about Gene Wolfe, part 3. Part 4 will be soon. This episode is a two-parter. I am talking about Max Easton's new novel, Paradise Estate. And then we're going to talk about a novel called The 20 Days of Turin. And to join me on this journey is the very author of that first book, Max Easton. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not only are you returning for an official episode rather than like the anthology episode that I had you on earlier this year, you're returning for a two-parter.
Yeah, it's a pretty happy accident. It makes me feel like a featured guest, but it's just like I couldn't get the book down to you in time, and then the post office held it, so it's like this weird sequence of events.
And also, yeah, I had a guest who needed to reschedule, so I'm like, let's just make it a two-parter. Like, why not? And I love chatting to you. We've met a couple of times, or was it one time? I don't know. We've talked a lot. Yeah. And so, I think when I was messaging you, I'm not going to call the podcast this, but this two-parter is a Max extravaganza.
As long as that's not Googleable. But I'm happy to be a part of it.
Max extravaganza, Easton. Could be like your drag name or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like I could make that work.
Okay, so we're talking about your new novel. It's a sort of a follow-up to The Magpie Wing, which we've covered on this podcast before. Go and listen to that. I'll link it in the show notes if you're interested. And this novel takes up kind of where that left off, with a few characters from that novel and then a few new ones. And it kind of involves a share house in Sydney. How else would you describe this, do you think?
I still haven't. Yeah, not because it's like so interesting I can't describe it, but in like a way that I had the same problem with the first book too. It's like I didn't know how to condense it. I don't know how to condense it, but yeah, I guess it's just a number of people trying to converge in a way is like how I think of it. And yeah, I guess drama in shoes type.
I hate describing my work too. Like it's
really difficult.
Just read it.
Yeah, but there are like books which are very about something, and I think this book is about share housing and is about that. But
the horrors and the melodramas and the comedy of share housing, like it's all of it, you know.
But it's also not really about share housing either. It's like that's just kind of like the backdrop in a way.
Yeah, and no, it's great, and I really loved it, and I was actually surprised that you were surprised that I loved it.
Yeah, but that's because
let's talk about
unpacking that.
Let's talk about. No, I want this to be the first question, because like I'm not going to go into like the note that you sent me. I thought it was very cute when you sent me the book. You sent me a note, but one thing you mentioned in the note was like you said you feel like this is the opposite of what I want in a novel. So why did you write that, Max?
I don't know. Maybe that's just like a cagey, like maybe that's just like how I feel whenever I put something out in a way. But yeah, I think because I've listened to the podcast your podcast started when I think I came across it at the same time. It was like around episode 1. And yeah, I just felt like, but I felt that of like all of you at the start, like of Rio and Ruben at the beginning. It's like the things that you guys were talking about. Just feel like I don't feel like my book is this. And I don't feel like my writing is this. Like, I don't know how to vocalize that or what exactly that was, but it's had this sense. It's just like, I don't think I'm writing in the realm of this podcast. in this way. It's like but yeah, it's like it's interesting because then to hear when that podcast came out of Ruben and Rio and Liam talking about the book really generously, like I was very surprised. And then to hear that you enjoyed it too. Yeah. I don't really know why I felt that.
Is it because you thought like I just have a penchant for really extreme things or something, and there wasn't enough like hardcore gay sex or like murders or or things like that?
Not enough murder and hardcore gay sex in my books.
Yeah, well, you've already started the third one, so just
yeah. Not that at all. I think it was more like I felt like because I feel like I'm writing in a thing that I also kind of dislike a little bit. Like it's a very, like I want to sit in a contemporary literature sphere, and a lot of contemporary literature, I think a lot of us as readers are a little bit frustrated with. And I guess it's like my fear as a writer sometimes is that like by sitting in that space, like I might be falling into the things that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like I'm doing the things I want to do, but yeah, it's like constantly this fear is a bit of an overstatement, but I feel like I'm sometimes like a little bit flirting with being something I don't want to do or I don't want to read.
Speaking of what you say, things that you don't want to read, things that you don't like, what are those things for you? In terms of, so you're speaking about a kind of mainstream literary scene. Is that sort of what you're getting at there, or
maybe? But like, I'm not
what's being published.
Yeah, I just think like there's a few tendencies that are, I guess the main thing. I don't want to be different. Like, I don't want to be like don't want to be wildly left of the dial of what a novel is now, because I want it to be like quite welcoming. I want it to be quite like easy to read, but I don't want it to be so easy to read that it's empty or vacant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember that specifically with that first book. But even though I was still learning to write when I was writing the first novel that I wrote, but because it was about kids, at the start, like I was really worried about it feeling like a YA novel, but I was also really dedicated to being like, these are kids, so I want them to be naive, and I want the narrator to be like have a naivety in its voice. Yeah, and same with this book. It's like it had to be set in a share house because that's just the setup that was going on when I was writing it. But I was like, I really don't want it to be like this millennial share house novel, which it is. But yeah. But then like I also want to sit in a place that I don't like so I can kind of like pull that apart too. Like the coming of age story and the Western Sydney novel and the Australian novel, like satirizing that was a really big part of the first book. And this one was kind of like satirizing the millennial novel and the all-knowing novel, like where it's like constantly commenting on itself and its own sort of thing. Like I wanted to like add another layer to that to like pull that apart. But when you're sitting so close towards writing something that you maybe don't like, it's really, but I'm also a very neurotic person. So maybe I'm just like sitting in my own neuroticism, but yeah,
no, it's good. I think if you're a neurotic person, especially if you're a neurotic writer, you should sit in your neuroses because, not that writing is a way to like therapize this, but like it is a way to make things more interesting for the reader.
Yeah, I think so. But I think you have to accept who you are too. Like you can't fight the type of writer that you are naturally. Like you can develop, but yeah, I think that's the real lesson I've learned over the last 5 or 6 years has been, admit to yourself that this is the type of writer you are, like almost.
Yeah, that's a real sign of maturity, I think, with a lot of writers, because it's like, I think when people are young, and this is just a fact of being young, is that you have certain I don't want to say heroes, but like people you idolize or people who you want to be like, so you emulate them. And a lot of young people do this, so they try to like, I don't know, I'm going to be the Zoomer fucking Dennis Cooper or something like that. So you try and do that.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen, by the way. That's like an impossible thing. Like there will never be a Zoomer Dennis Cooper. But like, so people have always done that. But I think part of like growing as an artist is like just being okay with your own way of doing things and just being kind of completely, I don't want to say authentic, but just honest with how you like to do things rather than how you think it should be done, you know? You know what I mean? Like, or how you think other people think it should be done, you know?
Yeah. And that you free yourself too. And like you, as long as you can, I think if you can tie that to like not caring so much about what the outcome is too, because I think like people can be honest with themselves in that, whether it's like writing or music or whatever it is, and then still obsess over like whether the book or the album or whatever didn't sell enough or wasn't heard by the right people or didn't get this like traction. It's like once you, it's like setting your own goalposts, I think, in a way. When you're comfortable with like, I want to do this, the outcome doesn't matter because I've either have or have not done what I want set out to achieve. And that's part of like being comfortable with your style or being comfortable with what you're doing, I think.
Well, speaking of your style, that's a good segue to talk about. And we've sort of already prefaced this in our own little exchanges about, you're like, this is in the third person. Like, and it's weird because it's in a very contemporary third person, but it's also a bit of a throwback too, because, and I noticed that you did this in the Magpie Wing as well, which is that for a lot of it, it is limited third person. So it is like you're seeing things through the eyes of a character, but you also like zoom out and like sometimes there are moments where you like head hop, which can be very disorienting. Not that you do it, but like some people can make it disorienting. But it's an older style that I think you never see it anymore, but I think you need to see it because I think what it does is it breaks this kind of view we have of society that is like super individualistic and super about like everyone's, you know, own truth or whatever like that. We need a sort of bigger sort of novel that like ranges over these things. Like it's not all about me.
Yeah.
And I think that style of like, it's in particular third person narration helps with that because basically third person limited, I feel like this is getting into really pedantic, like writer technical talk, but third person limited, I feel like, which for listeners, this is your sort of, I don't know, what's a good example of this? I know the Game of Thrones books or whatever, where it's just from a particular character's point of view, but it's in third person. So it's very close to their thoughts and their actions and things like that. That to me is just a way of having your cake and eating it too. Like you actually want to do first person.
Yeah.
You want a little bit of the freedom of third, but I feel like zooming out and having like a more capacious idea of third person is something that I think one hasn't been done very often, like recently. And two is kind of something you need to get a bit of perspective on like the present.
Yeah, definitely. But it's like this weird, because I think when I started writing, I was mixed first person and limited third person was like what came naturally. But when I had to start thinking about a bigger project and decide, like I almost had like an ideological thing. It's like the first person individual story is kind of like I almost feel like almost like it's like a Zizek thing. Like the first person individual story is an issue because it's like pushing like alienation and isolation in a way. And so that's when I decided to do third person. But like I was very limited on a skill level. Like I could never really understand what the difference was between all the different third person narration. And so I just started picturing it as like being a fly on the wall. But a fly on the wall telling a story, which is very like unsophisticated, I think. I think we've talked about this before. It's like considered almost anti-literary to have this sort of like inconsistent rule set. But I found so much freedom in writing like that because you have this sort of like, you know, you trust the narrator on some level. And it's not this like an unreliable narrator. It's not like an omniscience or anything like that. It's just sort of like sometimes you get the whole story and sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really interesting as a writer to be like imagining what the reader, trying to understand what the reader is picking up on and what they won't be picking up on, and then trying to fill those gaps and switching perspective and then switching rule sets as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes, and like I remember at some point being very like, I'm not doing it right and this isn't functional, but then sending it off to the publisher and like they had no comment on it and was like, oh, I like how you did this.
What did you not think was functional?
Just having inconsistent rule sets for the narrator and being like, sometimes they'll tell you everything and sometimes they won't. And sometimes you're in one character's head and sometimes you're not. And then sometimes a character disappears from the story entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes a new character comes in and sort of,
but Max, you got to realize that you're literally God. You can do whatever you want.
But like I feel like because I haven't studied writing or anything, and everyone that I know who has gone through that process, I feel like they've been very restricted by like the number of things you can and can't do. And I don't think anyone has ever really said that you can't do that, but yeah, like what you just said, that you were like, not in like godlike way, like a puppeteer type thing, but just in a you are delivering the tale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However you see fit, because you are the creator of the tale.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're constraining yourself through some like set of rules that you think you can and can't do, like you lose so much potential or possibility.
Constraints can be like fun and creative sometimes, but also they have to be matched to whatever the project is. So I think, but speaking of like rules and stuff like that, one of the things that this book does, which I really love and doesn't really happen too often in quote unquote literary fiction, is you go into the character's thoughts. Oh my God. Oh my God. You tell us what characters are thinking.
Like, is that considered like cheap or something? Or
no,
like
I think people are taught. I think people are taught in these like bullshit MFA programs that like one of the kind of the rules that you're taught, and also I've never studied writing. I've taught it before, but I've never studied it technically. But I think one of the rules you're taught in these sort of, you know, crisp clinical writing MFA sort of programs is that, like, as far as possible, don't reveal what the characters are thinking. That it's cheap to do that because like you want to reveal what the character is thinking through action, right? But what if you're writing something and you want to make it very clear to the reader what the character thinks? You just remove ambiguity. Why? Like, because I think one of the problems with, and I've complained about like bloodless contemporary writing before, one of the reasons it's bloodless is that there's so much ambiguity. Like you don't get this sort of like, you don't get the sense that the writer has any balls because they're not actually saying anything, because they're not revealing what their characters actually think and what their worldview actually is. Other than the only way you're allowed to do this is in dialogue. And then if you want to be sophisticated, you contrast what they say with what they do. And that's a perfectly fine kind of strategy, I think. But also if you're in third person, you're an omniscient narrator, you can go into what they think as well. But and I really appreciate that you do that. So thank you.
I'm glad you enjoy it. But I think like the fun part of that, like as an added layer of that, which I really enjoy writing, is like you write what the character thinks, but sort of include their own self-delusion in what is on the page. So it's like, this is what the character thinks. Is that what the character thinks? What is the character doing? And then the character that you haven't really talked about what they think. Like, there's just like so many layers you can play with.
And there's different layers to thoughts as well. Like this is what the character is telling themselves. Like this is their inner monologue or whatever.
Yeah.
But is that actually what they think? Or and also like, you know, delusions as well, like defense mechanisms that people psychologically put up and like are relating through the narration. Like this is all like verboten in like this contemporary style, which says that it should all be like pared back. You only get dialogue and you only get action about like what that, and that's the key to like sophisticated characterization. It's like, fuck that. Like tell me what the character thinks.
Yeah. And it is like, it ends up being quite boring in a way, or it can be very like hollow because you get the like, oh man, this character is kind of unlikable on some level because they're thinking one thing, doing another thing. And that makes them complex and flawed. But then if you look back at the whole book and you look back at that character, it's like they're not flawed at all. Like they end up being perfect. They end up being the only person who isn't being criticized, or the author isn't. Or if you peel back all the layers, the author is not complicit in any of the bad things that happen, almost like they're innocent or uncriticizable.
Yeah. And then it's also like, what are we doing here? Because, you know, are we writing films or are we writing novels? Because like you have the ability to go into characters' thoughts and more really in a novel. And it's almost like people are being taught to make their writing more cinematic. And I'm like, actually, I think you should make your writing less cinematic because it's not cinema. It's never going to compete with cinema. You should like play to the strengths of the novel, basically. This is something I've talked about in previous episodes, particularly with the Gene Wolfe series that we've been talking about, which is that lean into the form of the novel. Like why be ashamed of it? Like if you're writing a novel, write a fucking novel.
Yeah. And like writing a novel is, because I've spent like 10 years before writing fiction doing like essays and like and music writing and all this kind of stuff. And I've never felt so free until I had the novel form, because you really know how people are going to be reading it. Like, you know, someone's sitting in front of a book or a tablet. So you have like all these things which you know how it's going to be consumed. And you know that they're going there to read a novel. So they have like preconceived notions about what a novel is and like a certain background, understanding of what a novel is. And there's so much to play with there when you know what you're faced with. And yeah, it's so much fun. And I'm so glad that's with that turn, you know?
Yeah. And you can tell you're having fun too. Like that's one of the things that I think is great about reading this, is that it is fun to read.
That's good.
It was like clearly you had fun writing it too. And also the other thing I wanted to say about the prose as well, and this, do not take this as a neg.
No, I have a feeling what you're going to say and I'm going to enjoy it.
I really enjoy that you are not trying to impress the reader. So like, and that doesn't mean that it's not great writing, like it's not impressive writing. All it means is that it's not like trying to show how great a writer you are. Like it's more about we're delivering the story here. And this is like increasingly rare, especially for like quote unquote literary fiction, you know, that just fucking tell me the story. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, because that's what, like, I'm sure you feel
not negging you.
Yeah, like when you try to read something and you're not getting the sentence which drives the next sentence almost. It's like, it's just, and a lot of that comes with, I think, this like pervasiveness of like, well, you know, writer X isn't very good at the sentence level. And so it creates like a fear for these writers to be like good at the sentence level. But what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean?
What is good at a sentence level? And it's like, you want beautiful sentences. But why? You know, like, if you can do that and that's your natural way of writing, that's great. And like, there are writers with like really florid prose that I really enjoy, but I'm not capable of doing that. And when I've tried, it's been really bad.
Well, no, I think your sentences are really good because like there are long passages in this and the Magpie Wing as well that are like basically just uninterrupted prose, like paragraphs, like no dialogue, so that it's not broken up. But you never feel like it's a trudge through all the words. So clearly you do have like a sense of rhythm. And, you know, I think David talked about in the last episode, you know, a sentence being about tension and release. And like, as long as you got that, it doesn't have to be overly florid. Like, as long as you've got that, like, I think that's, you know, people can just be carried along by that.
I think that's like, because that's, I'm very conscious of rhythm. I think like when I edit, like maybe not so much when I write, but like short sentence, long sentence,
Oh yeah. I do that all the time where I'm like, oh, too many short sentences. I've got to turn it off.
And then, just like, there's like a section in the book it's about a third of the way in. And I did it intentionally and then got really afraid of it after it was too late to change it. Where I just like, it was like really fast moving at the start. And then I really wanted to shove that Nathan character in and be very like punishing, like very difficult and annoying to read. So there's really big paragraph blocks and just like shit that like very few people are going to care about, like info dumpy, long sentences sort of thing. And it's really fun to be like that, to have that consciousness of like, it's just going to bog the whole book down. And then at some point I was like, I think a lot of people are going to put the book down. At this point, maybe I fucked up, but then, you know, like that was the point. So I guess that's okay. But
well, yeah, I never put it down. I'm sorry. I'm not gassing you up. I just really like the book. So yeah.
I'm glad you liked it though. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's funny once you're done with something, like not knowing whether you've just done something really horrible or something good, you know? So gas me up, Matt.
Jesus
gas
Christ,
away.
Max. Come on, we got to work on your confidence.
No, I think it's healthy though. Like, could you know, like, I could not be the type of person who walks out of something feeling like walking on sunshine. Like, that's the best thing that's ever been published. Like, you would hate that much more than like a degree of like,
Oh, is this because you're sublimating a viciously narcissistic monster who just like lives for approval?
It's all for show, you know. I think it's all for show.
All right, so you wrote this basically as soon as you finished the last one, and it is sort of like, I wouldn't consider it a sequel so much as like, this is the Max Easton cinematic universe. But like it does share a couple of characters.
Yeah.
So in terms of the speed with which you wrote this, so basically Magpie Wing comes out 2021.
Yeah.
And you started this one basically immediately after that, or?
So probably, I think I submitted the final draft, like copy edits, in July 2021, and I started writing this December 2021.
Wow.
So a few months.
Yeah.
And then it was
a quick turnaround too, wasn't it?
18 months, like while working full time too. So it was sort of crammed. Yeah, it was not. It's pretty weird to think back on now. But like, yeah, 18 months while working full time. So like in lunch breaks, after work.
So you wrote it in 18 months?
Yeah.
And then published it very soon after that, though, didn't you? Like,
yeah, so that was up until when the last edits would have been August of this year. And then some like typesetting stuff, and then to the printers.
So that's a pretty fast turnaround. Like normally, like a book takes fucking 3 years to come out.
Yeah.
Like, so did you push the publishers on that, or like how did this happen?
Yeah, I did. It was sort of.
And why?
Well, because it was sort of. How did that happen? After the first book, we contracted the second one at some point. Because I think it did well enough for them to be like, yeah, come back and do more. And like I had an idea, so it was like easy. And the setup was that the whole book was going to be set in 2022, which, you know, like it was maybe going to be fluid, that like it could flex, we could move from that. But I was very like, if it's going to be set in 2022, I don't want it to publish too far after that, because I knew it was going to happen, and it happened anyway. It was like the things that you think are very 2022 are going to become cringeworthy within months, you know, like, and like sticking to like the frame of reference of say like September 2022 and now it's August 2023 and all these things have happened is like I really wanted to push this sort of ultra contemporaneous writing and publication. And that happened because the first book, I had this opportunity to rewrite the whole thing because the pandemic happened and it was supposed to end in the present day. It was like the whole setup for that book, but then everything was different and like the tone was different. So I got to like, within 3 months, edit the whole thing, add this like feeling that was in the air. So it felt like it led to that moment. And I really enjoyed that process of like writing really quick and writing really close to the moment. And I just wanted the whole second book to be that. And like, I'm sure anyone who's like, I've never worked in publishing, but I've worked as an editor before, and like the amount of grace that Giramondo gave me to push that project is like, yeah, very rare, I think. The turnaround time that I pushed and that they let me go with is really special, I think.
We were speaking about fear earlier, and did you think in writing it, and maybe this is what was motivating you when you wrote it, something that's so close, so like just a year before it was the setting, do you think because of the way that the present or the now works now, there's a hazard in writing the now, because like by the time you've published or even by the time you've finished the manuscript, things are so different in terms of like capturing some kind of moment?
Yeah, for sure. But I was also very conscious of like someone will read this book in 10 years time. And so the pressure now, I think, for writers is to be very like ready for the release cycle. You know, you want to write, I think it's very common to write a book about something topical. And so you want to make sure that it releases during a time where it's still topical. But like I'm very motivated by the idea of a novel as a document, because like I read old books and it's like really enlightening to read a book from the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or the 30s or whatever, like whatever period, and to get a feeling for the time. And it's not, I feel like it's not very encouraged now to write for the time. But it's encouraged to write about something topical. So it's like this contradiction that And that was something I really wanted to play with, but I knew that it was going to be a risky experiment in that. And there are parts of the book which, like, I read now, it's like, ugh, it's like quite cringy. But like, there were times where it's like, oh, I have a character who's meant to be cringy. I have multiple characters who are meant to be somewhat cringe, and like I wanted to allow it to happen too. But yeah, like that fear, like that you mentioned, it's like I definitely knew that was gonna like it could be very uncomfortable and it could burn, like in a way, like it could be a very bad book. But like I had to be okay with that.
Well, one of the reasons why I asked that is because I think, a book set in the 50s, like you mentioned, like describing the contemporary world in the 50s, it's pinning down a moment, but writing the present then is different to writing the present now.
Yeah.
Like, so, because I think now, because we're all fragmented by various things, like there's so much contestation everywhere about what the now actually is. Like, yes. And obviously I've talked about, current Thingism, which is like the idea of like this topical sort of like way of looking at the world, which is kind of like a fake conception of the now anyway. Like, it's like the jostling of various different, I don't know what you would call them, factions, worldviews, subcultures, whatever, for prominence in like the discourse, right? So if you abide by that particular kind of view of what the present constitutes, like you kind of not getting that novelistic sweeping view of culture. Like instead you're just getting like a series of talking points and minutiae basically that's sort of bubbling up from discourse machines like Twitter or whatever. And one of the things that's really good about your novel is that you do mention that and like play with that a little bit. Like people are checking Twitter, people are like, it's sort of in the background in this sort of like hazy way. And also because, it's a share house full of anarchists. And maybe that's why you thought I would hate it, because I hate anarchists, but
maybe.
But like, and so one of the funniest, there are so many like little funny moments where like various things happen and like people are like, what's our position on this? And like they have to work out what they think about something according to their little, subcultural milieu or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, it's weird. That's the way to do it, I think, is that you lean into the current Thingism of it while not like accepting the terms. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And like, I guess that was because it's so funny. Like so many of the things I wanted to do were things I don't like. So that was quite challenging. But
what do you mean? Like things you don't like? What do you mean?
Well, yeah, because I don't. Okay, so like that. There was a point, like in an early draft, where there was like almost like round table dialogue points.
That'd be so funny.
It was so bad. It was so bad, and like some of it's still in the final draft. But like, because I remember watching the what was that show? Oh, White Lotus, which I really liked. But there's
a great show.
There's lots of dialogue points where it just goes from like, well, what do we think about this? And it goes on to the next thing. It goes to the next thing. It's like joke, topical thing. And I started watching that. I was like, I had to like cut all this shit out because like I don't like the way that was.
Well, actually,
like it felt like a Twitter thread, Like
I kind of glad you mentioned that, because I did get a very White Lotus vibe from this, in the sense of like, obviously it's not set in a resort or anything like that.
Yeah.
But in the sense that I feel like this is going to have, this is my prediction. This book is going to have like the same kind of reception as White Lotus does, where people who the show / the book is satirizing are going to love it. and not realize that it's satirizing them.
That's interesting, yeah. But I mean, it's sort of like that's probably true, but it's kind of like what I really wanted to do with this one was like I wanted to satirize everyone and myself. So, and then like be aware of like the inverse read.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like the Sonny and Nathan characters are totally opposed, but they engage in identical behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are, they're doing the same things in a different way through a different lens. But like Nathan is set up as like the cheap, like easy, he's set up for laughs, whereas Sonny is like quite a heartful character.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see how if you were of a sensibility that Nathan is from, that like Sonny would be quite annoying to you, and vice versa.
Well, this is a very realistic novel, like depicting people of a certain class and a certain political tendency. The grim realities of share housing, but that is one fantastic element to it that I don't quite buy, and that's a non-binary character who's not annoying. You got a unicorn right there, Matt.
There we go. We did.
But yeah, so yeah, I really get what you're saying there. Like the Nathan character being this sort of like orthodox Marxist sort of our position on this, and like thinks through everything. Like, but they also come from a place where at any moment, and indeed in many moments throughout the book, they can retreat to mummy and daddy's wealth, they can while being a comrade, so to speak. So that was lovely, and the juxtaposition, I really got that too with Sonny, who is a very lovable character, but has those same sort of dynamics going on there. Very interesting. I kind of don't want people to realize that though. It's the same. It's like that White Lotus thing. I kind of want them not to notice that.
Yeah. There's a lot of there's a lot of things in there that was I hope are very are missed. Whereas with writing the first novel, there's a point I was very conscious of what if people don't get it? What if people don't get this? So, what if people think this part's serious and this part isn't a joke?
Mm-hmm.
And then going through the release cycle and the reception cycle, it's some people are going to get the wrong thing and they're going to miss the wrong thing and they're going to interpret it in their own way, which was really illuminating for writing another one, because you can now you're free to have all these other things you can do, and sort of
I really think
write against this person and write for this person, and then turn it over a bit. And
I really think you can't really think too much about it, because sometimes people get things and sometimes they really don't. I think I've spoken about this on the podcast before, but I remember years ago when I read Christos Scholkas's Barracuda. Have you ever read that one?
I haven't,
no. Well, so basically it's about this half Greek, half skip kind of swimmer guy, and basically he ruins his swimming career. You'd like it, actually. It's sort of about sport and Aussie culture and stuff like that. But it's a very big book, and structurally it's very interesting. And it's interesting because what it does is it has, I can't remember the exact details, but I think the past is a first person narration from the character, and then the present, which is the now, is from a third person narration looking at the older, the Danny who is older, right? After he's ruined his career. But the thing that's interesting about it is that the first person narration goes chronologically forward to the end.
Yeah.
The third person narration goes from the end to the start. So it starts now and then goes back in time. Whereas So it's really interesting. I found that was the most interesting thing about the novel.
Yeah.
Literally 0 reviews in this country picked up on that. Like,
yeah.
So like even professional kind of critics and things like this don't get things, and some people do. Like,
well, it was a very different critical sphere then too. Like probably back then you would have more, because when was that published? It was 90s?
No, that would have been
earlier.
No, later. So 2000, possibly 11. I think it was the one just before or just after the slap.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But even then, like you could be a book critic and be paid pretty well and have the time to spend on a book. Like now, it's like I have no like book critics are getting paid nothing to spend a lot of time on something. So it's like I don't have any issue with someone getting stuff wrong anymore.
It's not so much getting stuff wrong. What I'm saying is like
like missing important
missing things is like you just have to accept that people are going to miss things. Like because that to me was very obvious and very really effective stylistic choice, and it's just like they really didn't notice it. They were like a lot of reviews even that I read even sort of complained about like the shift between first person and third person without recognizing that that's what it was doing. Like it was like showing his future versus his history.
I know, just like let every book critic off the hook, but isn't that like very funny how like someone would be like, why is this person done this by accident?
My point is that like you can't control reception, and people are going to miss things. People are going to get things, and also people are going to get things that out of what you're doing that you just like didn't intend, and that's cool too. I think that's actually one of the cooler things.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was bringing characters back from the first book. So you've got Helen, who's one of the main characters from the Magpie Wing. And a couple of others as well, but she's sort of the main one. Did you have any kind of apprehension about that, in the sense that, when you write a character in a novel, they start somewhere and they end somewhere else? Yeah. Did you want to redo that process for like Helen, or was there any trepidation, do you think, about bringing back characters?
There was, but the reason I decided to do a sequel.
So we're going with it's a sequel, are we?
Well, it isn't. But like now that I know what the third one is, like because now I'm starting to write again, and it's like a continuation. It's like I think this is a series or a trilogy or something, or like it will be ongoing until it feels like it's not ongoing anymore. I think for as long as the publisher wants it. And
Elena Ferrante right here.
Yeah. Yeah. But then, and I think I can just keep self-publishing stuff if it runs out of steam, but yeah, the choice was because I like over the years have taken an interest in new books, and I'd read the first book by a new author, and then the second book is drastically different with a different publisher, like a better publisher, and it's done in a different style, and the thing that made the first one really interesting is gone. And because it's meant to be this big leap, like it's almost like it felt like a lot of writers tried to get their first book out of the way, which, I really felt that at the end of the first book. I felt like, oh God, I don't have to write a novel again. I can go back to music writing. And like, that's it. I've done it. Like I've fulfilled the thing I always wanted to do, which was like write a book. But once I started sensing this thing of like the number of writers who just like small publisher, major publisher, like just fuck off, and then they go this thing, and then they fall into this trap of trying to do this like bigger, better book about something different or something more important. Like I still felt what I was writing about was important, or interesting or relatable or unique, or like I felt like I wanted to do it again. And the initial idea was to do like I wanted to write about all the same themes again because there was a little bit of a pushback about like writing about rugby league and writing about punk music and politics. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it again. Like, fuck this. Like, I'll do it
you
again.
guys.
Yeah, totally. But then when I realized how much that kind of opened up to, like, to be able to come in, like, I wanted to write it as though it was a new book, so you don't have to read the first one, like, by any means. But if you did read the first one, there is so much more that you can bring into it. And then if you were to read the second one, you could go back and read the first one and kind of get more out of it. Especially with like the absence of a character in the second book, and to go back and like rediscover them, I think would be really interesting way to read. Yeah, so it really, like, the idea to continue the stories and bring back characters was because like every external message seemed to be don't do it, or this isn't the way it's supposed to be, you know. And that made me really want to do that.
Yeah, why not do the Max Easton cinematic universe? Like,
why not?
Why not? It's good enough for Disney or whatever. You can do it too.
Yeah, and then I was really conscious of that too, because I was a little bit like all cultures doing this. Like every TV show's a spin-off, and every IP movie has to like interlink with another IP movie, and that this is the death of culture. Like everything having to interlink and expand into a bigger thing, so you become dependent on buying all the things, is kind of like the death of culture. And I was like, so do it. But
don't ask questions, consume products.
Yeah, totally.
And then consume more products.
Consume more product. But that became a really fun thing to play with too, because like I wanted the book to do that in a kind of, not a self-aware way, but like in a way that was sort of like, yeah, maybe all forms can do this. Yeah.
Also, I wanted to talk about the I've lived in my fair few share houses before. I've never lived with insufferable anarchists, but clearly you have.
I actually have never lived with an insufferable anarchist, but
well, you have some experience with them somehow, I guess. But like, I found that was really interesting in the sense of like all of these people being like bound together through a kind of subculture of punk music and left-wing anarchist politics or whatever. But other than that, being like completely different people, and that's like where a lot of the hilarity for me comes from, is like this inability to recognize, and this is something that I think is broadly, I don't know, broadly sort of like swept under the rug with a lot of people of a left-wing persuasion, particularly of this type, just not acknowledging how different individual people can be.
Yeah.
Like they just think if you can, if you just like impose this program, everyone's going to is just going to react to it the same way. And I found that really interesting, like how you played with the tensions over that. Like, for instance, like Rocco is a very different person to, say Sunny or Helen or whatever, but they're all like bound together by these particular beliefs, but the way they express these beliefs is very different. So that was a funny thing to explore, I think.
Well, I think a lot of that is like, this may disappoint you, but like I am the insufferable anarchist. I am like somewhere between an anarchist and a communist. But whenever I have tried to be involved, like with anarchists or communists, I find them too insufferable on some aesthetic level, which is so tragic but funny to me, which is like where a lot of like, I think the mournfulness in the book and like in myself comes from, is like your whole thing is premised on some degree of like everyone's got to do it together. but you fucking hate everyone individually.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Mm-hmm.
like in your specific, I don't think I quite got there with this book, but like that being involved with punk music and playing in all these punk bands and having like a belief system, which is somewhere around this like punk anarchist communist sort of triumvirate. And then you have to like be in solidarity with I don't know, like a raver or something. And like I like going to raves and I like talking to ravers, but then when the white dreadlocks come out, it's just like a bit much. And then all those sort of collective things like fall apart. And as well, like being like growing up, working class, like I still live paycheck to paycheck, and there are like pseudo celebrity anarchists in the community on $50, $60 an hour income, secret $40,000 government grants that I don't tell anyone about, and like rich parents back home. It's like a really weird source of conflict and like inconsistency, which like I had to write about, and I found that really interesting because I feel like if you were to write about that from maybe like a very bitter right-wing position, you would kind of lose some of the effect or like the subtlety of it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Whereas,
I feel like
that
you have
cynical left position, kind of like cynicism and bitterness. Like,
yes,
are very
yeah.
different.
I think, yeah, because I think more right-wing people don't really understand. Like, there's not really many right-wing subcultures, and the ones that do exist are kind of fucking noxious. Like,
yeah.
But so like they don't really get that sense of that communal kind of stuff. Like you can find like a funny right-wing kind of satire of certain things. Like for instance, but the best stuff that like really pins it down are people who are, ensconced in that. Like I really think the best description, and I've done it on the podcast, the best description of the issue with like left-wing people was from George Orwell. Communists hate me talking about this, but like it's true. He like really pins down what the problem with like more left-wing people is, and it's mostly a class thing, that like they despise both the rich and the poor. They despise the rich slightly more. That's basically the dynamic. Yeah. And so in terms of like these subcultures, I do think you do, to kind of really like get at it and satirize it in a really delicious way, you do have to have a familiarity with it that some right-wing guy is not gonna, or girl is not gonna, get. So that's why it's kind of really like pointed and hilarious, I guess. But I noticed that you said something that I think is really important, where you said, you're all about these people are all about like, communality and stuff like that, but they hate people. It's like people power, but people suck. It's you're in the wrong ideology.
It's really difficult, and it's the thing which like holds the whole thing back, and it's like this really weird, like immovable force, unstoppable object type thing. Yeah. I find it, especially with like radical art, quote unquote, radical art, radical poetry, radical writing, whatever it is. It's like a number of the practitioners wouldn't be caught dead in a room with working class people. In the contemporary, like maybe their imagination of what a working class person was, but there are so many things you have to deal with, which is like a contemporary working class, like truly paycheck to paycheck, can't make rent. That kind of person has no time to unpack every global issue, let alone any of them, and so they come with their own flaws, like inherent flaws, and inability to talk about topic X, Y, Z. So you put them in a room with the middle class radical writer, and they're ostracized almost immediately.
But also never in that dynamic is it ever countenanced that the quote unquote uneducated working class person might be right about some things.
Yeah.
Like,
or at least through their lived experience,
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's always like this view, very condescending view about like educating working class people. And, that's why I don't really have time for these kinds of people because of that.
Yeah.
But, that's a whole other episode. but yeah, like I really enjoyed the satire, and that like clearly you've had exposure to these subcultures that has clearly informed the satire there. But this is another thing where I think part of it is sort of like, the deliciousness of the satire is that like, oh yeah, people should have like, so I could imagine someone reading it and being like, oh yeah, people should have like, communal, sort of councils about various things in their share house and stuff like that. I'm like, no. one of the things that Sonny says that's really funny is like, no chores roster. We're like in our 30s. So true. The chores roster being this sort of like, Soviet style imposition on people.
Yeah, which is so funny because there's like, and this is like a weird thing about getting older, whereas like I was quite comfortable share housing maybe 7-8 years ago, and then like every year it just became a little bit less impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And the part of it being impossible was like, like I'd be doing all the cleaning in the share house. It's like you're all slobs. And it was like the need to want to impose a cleaning roster so that someone else did some of the work.
Mm-hmm.
Was one of the ugliest parts of myself that I ever felt. Like, not that I ever carried through with it, but I just left the house. But
see, that's not an ugly part of you. That's ugly part of everyone else, because they weren't pulling their weight and weren't cleaning up after themselves.
Yeah.
So like, this is the problem. But this is the problem with this worldview, is that like it like responsibilizes like this. Yeah, it makes you feel bad about something, where it's like, no, it's the collective, like it's the individuals in the collective who aren't pulling their weight. And so I think that's the problem when you like overemphasize this idea of a collective, and not like put things back on individuals, like that. No, you're responsible for this because you didn't clean up.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like a getting older, like I said, embrace the boomerism.
Embrace you inner boomer.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like, it's also just the idea is rich. Like the idea of everyone being able to contribute to a whole is really promising. And a part of the mournfulness of not being able to have that is because there are individual inequalities between all of us. But also it's just like the degree of work that people have to do that isn't a part of contributing to that whole is different too. Like, like I'm working 5 to 6 days a week now, and it's so many parts of my life like falling to the wayside. And if you try to get on the same level as someone who works 2 or 3 days a week or less, I feel like there's like a lack of acknowledgement of that sometimes, especially when it becomes like your academic leftists who somehow can't understand why people can't make it along to protests because they work Saturdays or something like that.
Your academic leftists who won't do dishes.
Yeah. In the share house.
I'm different, don't care who knows it. Something about me is not the same yet. I'm different, that's how it goes. Ain't gonna play your goddamn game. Got a different way of walking. I got a different kind of smile. I got a different way of talking. drives the women kind of wild.
Kind of wild. He's different.
They don't care who knows it.
Something about him.
It's not the same, yeah.
He's different.
That's how it goes.
He's not gonna play your gosh darn game.
I ain't saying I'm better than you are, but maybe I am. I only know that when I look in the mirror, I like the man.
We like the man.
I'm different, and I don't care who knows it. Something about me is not the same, yeah. I'm different, that's how it goes. Ain't gonna play your goddamn game. When I walk down the street in the morning, bluebirds are singing in the tall oak tree. They sing a little song for the people, they sing a little song for me. Thanks, fellas.
He's different, and you don't care who knows it. Something about him, not the same. He's different, that's how it goes. And he's not gonna play your gosh darn game.
I'm different, I don't care who knows it. Something about me, it's not the same, yeah. I'm different, that's how it goes. Ain't gonna play no boss man's game.
One thing I wanted to ask about was like in the previous episode you were on, one thing you said that was really, and I think you actually said it in this episode earlier, the idea of living in a book. I love that this book is literally about living too, like share housing, like, but you know, people's living situations. But it's almost like it's funny because it's almost like they don't have lives, or at least not the lives that they want. And I think this really, and you know, this has been done before, but like, I think this really pins down the sort of pervasive sense that, you know, the younger generations have, you know, from like elder millennials down, which is that we're all just sort of in this holding pattern. But also there's this real sense that the holding pattern is eternal. Like it's actually never going to end. It's just always going to be this. This is what it's going to be now. And instead, and this links back to the stuff we were saying before about like current thing, right? Like instead of living your lives, many of them, especially the very politically active, are kind of reduced to this reaction to current things, right? Like, and I think 2022 is a great year for this because it's like the Ukraine stuff. It's like just coming out of the pandemic stuff. And by the way, the relationship between those things is very interesting. I'm not sure if you were conscious of that. Like, it's like, all right, let's take the COVID cartridge out and let's put the Ukraine cartridge in, you know, like it's that, I think there was a meme that did that, but like, but, you know, this idea of waiting for your life to get started. And it just never starting. Like, it's just perfectly rendered here. And that, obviously that was intentional, right?
Yeah, I'm glad that came through. That, like, I really wanted to capture that, like, before I even knew, because like a lot of this book was written as 2022 happened, so there was like a substantial amount of it that happened before the Russia-Ukraine stuff, and then you know, like I sort of knew that it was going to be in this like post but not quite post COVID type thing, and if anything I was hoping it did go away so I didn't have to write about it, but I was like committed to like whatever happened in 2022 I would like allow that to be a part of it in some way. Yeah, and I think what like I remember that feeling when like the bushfires happened in Australia in 2019 going into 2020, and then COVID happened. It was like, yeah, cartridge out, cartridge in, cartridge out, and that's so being so conscious of the moment is like this pervasive thing, which is a problem for a lot of people, and they can't like switch out of it and think even just something as simple as like you should be thinking in 5 or 10 year time spans, but we think in 3 week time spans, and that's like a part of our generational pathology, I guess, is that we like seem to be unable to think in the long term. So yeah, that was a big part of the writing, I guess. I've already forgotten your question.
No, I was just saying that like the pervasive sense that like we're all in this holding pattern, and
yeah, that's right.
And also the sense that it's probably never going to end, like waiting for life to get started. But it's interesting, like Helen particularly is emblematic of this. And by the end of the book, she does have this, like, she's just fed up and wants her life to start. And like, I think that is sort of, and I think she probably wanted that from the start, but it's more like she's kind of ready to do that, to like try to make it happen maybe. And you kind of have to do that. Like you do, I know it's not just about share housing, but share housing is related to it. Like, you know, living during the pandemic, I was living with my partner and like 4 other people. Yeah. And that was good to have like a little community, but it was also kind of awful because it's like, I don't want to be doing this into my 40s. So that's why I don't share house anymore. And you pretty much have to make a conscious decision to do that, right?
Yeah. But like there was like a big thing I really wanted to get through is like people have never had the choice. Like most people who share house, no one really wants to share house. Like everyone wants their own like space. Like share housing's nice to have company and everything, but like a big part of this book and the characters being mostly in their 30s or entering their 30s is that feeling of like, other than Nathan and Alice who have the choice, they have the option to go do whatever they want. The others don't have a choice. Like they are, everything is by necessity and they're stuck. Which is how I feel too. Like I don't want to be working full time and then coming home and trying to write a book. Like I just want to be writing, but I also want to be out in the world and like, you know, engaging with people, talking to people and like living a life. Like I think a lot of people who are able to write 24 hours a day, in this moment, particularly, like tend to write these things which are so divorced from reality, and they feel like thin and hollow because they're not able to reflect what people are going through.
And also they don't interact with people as well. So it always rings hollow. Like you can you can always tell when when a writer is a good conversationalist or at least a good listener, because they have an ear for the way that people speak, you know? And that's more a dialogue thing, obviously, but like you can kind of tell. People have an openness. And I think you do. People have this idea that to be a writer, you have to like lock yourself in your garret or whatever. But no, you need to, you need to be in the world. Like, and that's why I think a day job is actually good for a writer. Maybe not working so much, but like you do need to, particularly if you want to write about now, like you need to interact with the people who exist now, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to go through as well some of the characters that I loved. Like my favorite character is Rocco. And that's not just because he's a hot tradie who's Italian. But no, I really like that because that is like, not to get too like, manosphere here, but like just an uncomplicated, sort of depiction of a competent male. It's just completely like, you don't see that anymore, you know, like he comes into the house and fucking fixes everything, you know, and there's always, obviously he's a person who you've made have flaws and things like that. Sure. But like, it's always like any kind of depiction of a man who is like, you know, helpful, competent or whatever has to be like downgraded in some ways. I'm not,
Yeah.
I promise I'm not doing the manosphere thing, but like what I'm saying is that it's just refreshing to see that rather than like, you know, people are very, let's clear our throat when we like depict an unashamedly kind of masculine man. So I kind of appreciated that. Yeah. And he seemed kind of hot.
Well, he's an athlete.
Yeah. He's a
Yeah,
rugby player,
and
and
like,
I
that's
love
like-
rugby players. So
Yeah, it's the
big
perfect
juicy
human form.
thighs, like
Yeah. Yeah, and like that wasn't like a comment or anything about like masculinity, which is really funny because like by virtue of being a white man, like a lot of the stuff that I write gets taken as like a comment on masculinity. But it's just not at all. Like Rocco is more a comment on class than anything. And it's like he works physically. Like whenever I've done a lot of laboring work over the years, and whenever I've done it, like I've learned so much about my body while I'm doing it and about like the resilience of sort of starting something and finishing something. Like you dirty something, you put it away. Like you create this thing, you sweep it all up when you're done, you move it away, you put it in the bin, you close up, you lock up and you leave, it is like considered this really weird, like, and it's Jordan Peterson's fault because he had this whole thing about making your bed and then he aligned making your bed with like being a fascist. But like there's a degree of just like working hard and like getting your stuff done and like not leaving things behind, which is really like a real working class value that I grew up with, not in a fascistic way, just in a human way.
I don't think Jordan Peterson's a fascist. I think that's just a meme, but like,
yeah, maybe.
But like, yeah, I get that too. Like, because my dad was in the military, so we had a very military upbringing. So that was all inculcated in us. Like, so this is why I struggle so much in so many share houses, because it's like, you're supposed to fucking clean up after yourself, like straight away.
Well, my mum was like, you leave the kitchen cleaner than you enter it.
Exactly.
You know? The mum was a nurse, so like all of those things came from like nursing, like those sort of you cook and you clean as you go and you do all these things, and like my standards have slipped so much over the years, obviously, but yeah, I really wanted to like accentuate that with Rocco. Is like a lot of those people in that house, like in that share house in the book, wouldn't have engaged with like a rugby league playing scaffolder for years. And so like his arrival in that book, like I really want it to be like this shock of like, and even just things like the moment he walks in, Helen disappears from the book because she's busy, you know, like she's busy dating and like working and that sort of stuff. So like switching over to him as this like rude shock into the house, I thought was really, really interesting way to play that, or like a fun way to play that at least. And yeah.
I guess the big thing that like people would talk about with him is the murder of the cat.
Yeah.
Which, sorry, maybe I'm a psychopath, but that was funny.
Well, like that was meant to be like funny, and like I didn't really, until the end, I didn't really consider that it would be a controversial point. Because I feel like he's so justified in his head. And like when you write a character, you know, like when I write this character, it's like I need to really get into like his mode of thinking. And I felt like that would make a lot of sense. I don't wanted everyone else to be too busy to really know what to do about it. But I saw some like not long before the final draft, saw some like internet chatter about another book which teased the possibility of a dog dying in the book.
Oh, come on.
And the readers were like, please let me know if this is happening because I can't read the book if a dog dies.
Oh no, there's like whole sites that like list if a book or a movie or something if the dog dies. Like, so
I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah, so they know beforehand, like before going in.
Yeah.
And like fucking hell. Like, first of all, it's fiction.
Yeah.
And second of all, like, just grow up.
Well, it's pretty like, yeah, it's fascinating part of like new culture, I guess. And like, but if you want to be like a writer for a large audience, I guess you have to pay attention to that. Whereas like I think the only thing I changed was like the scene immediately after the cat gets killed. Like I had, like Rocco cook a ragu.
That was funny. That was great.
I thought that would
love
be funny. Like at least,
especially like a traditional like they all the different regions had their different versions of it, but like the one that you described was like had like
with the ossobuco,
with the ossobuco and everything. Like that was really good. I like that. No, don't change, Max.
No, like I don't want to change, but I do want to be like, I think this is a thing which a lot of like writers who consider themselves transgressive or something, like they lean in too far with like a lack of awareness of what that bulk reader might think or feel. So like I still want to welcome that, even though I don't have like an understanding of why you wouldn't read a book because a dog dies in it. Like the idea that like someone out there exists who will get in there and be confronted by that, at least want to play with it or acknowledge that it exists. And that's acknowledging like writing to the now, I think.
Partially, but I also think that like you can't get hung up on that. Like, I feel like one of the things that was really, I don't know if I'll say it publicly, whatever. I presented very briefly at a friend's creative writing class, right? And it was one of my essays about like social media dynamics. I was talking about how, cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, is basically bullshit, and it's usually leveraged against people. I was talking about the instances of it when it was leveraged against people who weren't in positions of power, like people who it's leveraged against people who are at the whims of like at will employment and stuff like that in the US. And so they're all Zoomers, so they were a bit uncomfortable with me saying like, don't cancel people. Like it's bullshit. People who have a right to work, it doesn't matter what and provide for their family. It doesn't actually matter what they think. But it wasn't just that. The thing that disturbed me most about this kind of thing was there was another student who was presenting their major work, which is, I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to like dox him or whatever, but he was talking about a particular subculture, working subculture, like in Tasmania. And he was going to base his novel around this. But within this subculture, the main character was a young man who was going to get like radicalized by like some kind of element. He kind of sort of left it vague in terms of politically what it was. And then he got all of these questions after he did his presentation about people about saying like, yeah, but you're talking about radicalization. What if like people read the novel and they're radicalized by the depiction of radicalization? And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, do you not understand what fiction is? Like, like a depiction of something is like, I can't believe I have to say this, but a depiction of something is not an endorsement of it. And once you, one of the reasons why fiction is so stale now is that people close themselves off to a lot of these things. And so I don't think you need to be, especially if you're not predisposed to being edgy, you don't need to be edgy. But it's like, I don't think you need to say that, oh, we can't depict certain things because someone might think something, that's like, there's so many mights there. Like,
and it's also like, I understand where that comes from, but I don't think it really, I'm quite curious. I was talking about a friend today, like this event or that before I came here to talk to you. It's like the novel or the short story that 100 people are going to read isn't going to radicalize anyone. It's like the algorithms they're faced with is going to radicalize them. Particularly in the case of like, you have to have like some degree of respect for your reader too, like especially if you're doing it in a satirical way or a parodic way, or but you also have to be aware, I think, which is where like maybe some of the incongruity kind of like comes into it. It's like you have to be aware that most readers are going to have this like cringy element. Like if you like, you know, if you present a neo-Nazi character, there's going to be 50% of your readers are going to like start feeling tense and weird and maybe want to put the book down and maybe throw it out, or like, or maybe like screenshot it and put it on the internet and take it out of context or something like that. So I don't think it should stop you from writing about it, but I feel like you should be aware of it and so, and make your decisions around it too. Like have like a few people have kind of like DM'd me some short stories over the years where it's just like full of slurs and stuff like that, and that's fine if that's the way you want to write, but you have to be aware that like people are going to read that and discount you immediately, like rightly or wrongly, it's the reality. So you have to make those decisions, I think, as a writer. Like, do you want to be read or not? Do you want your writing to be thrown in the bin or not? And so like I've decided that like I don't want to present that type of character, but I do want to, like, you know, like the Dale character in the book, like I do really want to push him into like let like your imagination run of where he ends up in the book. Like like it's very subtle, and I didn't think anyone would pick up on it, but like one of the first things like a friend of mine, Neil from Brisbane, said when he read it was like, yeah, I love that Dale became a neo-Nazi at the end. It was like, he doesn't really on the page, but like off the page he does.
Yeah, there's that suggestion there.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think, I don't know. It's just really scary to me that like the younger generations and also like ostensible future writers have this attitude. And it's like, and this is such an old man yells at previous generations. But like, I think I think in a previous episode, we agreed that we're old men. We're the first old men who are right.
Someone's got to be.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't know, like, for instance, a really good example of this in terms of depiction versus like what the artist intended is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. Like, a lot of people read that book and do not realize that it's actually a comedy. Like they take these like flights of like violent fantasies and stuff like that straight and serious, and don't recognize what he's doing. That's not his fault.
No, yeah.
Like that's not Bret Easton Ellis's fault. That is the fault of, you know, the readers. But I understand where you're coming from, because you come from a very, like we were discussing earlier, where you want, you don't want to make it, you have a respect for the reader, I think, that, whereas like some writers a little more, they want to kind of like prod the reader a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Or they want to prod them in different ways.
Well, they want to like, you know, like freak out the squares.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
that's
like,
right. And you need
I want to freak out the squares, but I want to freak out like the rich pearl clutching squares. Like I feel like I still want to bring people in who are maybe sympathetic to most of the ideas. Like, yeah, there's a specific type of reader who I want to be uncomfortable in the book, and there's a specific type of reader that I want to feel welcome in the book. Yeah, the Bret Easton Ellis, the American Psycho thing is so funny. It just like reminds me of, there was like a reel or something like that of the guy who did like the Patrick Bateman workout and skincare routine. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that.
It was like really young guy, like beautiful man, but it's just like, this is so fucked up. That like, and again, like what you're saying, it's like it's not on that writer. It's not on Bret Easton Ellis that guy. That's what he took from the movie version of the book. But
yeah, but like
It's also like low percentage.
Yeah, you're always going to get pearl clutchers and people who don't get like, you know, the vicissitudes of artistic expression or whatever. The dangerous and concerning thing about this is when you have writers and artists who think like the pearl clutchers.
Mm.
That is the thing that I like rail against and I really, really despise.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, so that was like a very concerning experience for me when I went and spoke in front of that class, because I was
imagine,
like, what is going on?
But I feel like that would be a very common experience now for like people talking about creative writing in schools. Yeah, I don't know what. But also, it's like one of those things. Like there is like a real. I keep saying culture death. It's just like a shorthand, but it's like like a real culture death in mainstream writing and film and TV. But there is a lot of people outside of that world doing interesting things, like as much as there ever was, I think. But there's just so much stuff that it's easier to fixate on the worst of it than seek out like that kind of stuff at the margins, which is still really interesting. And
that's very true. And even stuff in the mainstream, like you have to go out and find, because, well, to some extent the mainstream doesn't really exist anymore. But because it's all just like a series of different streams rather than a mainstream. But yeah, even like like we talked about White Lotus before, like very mainstream sort of show. Everyone was talking about it, but very subversive because of its mainstream appeal. Like, you know, it was the murder mystery, cheap kind of plot of like someone dies and then you've got to go through all the episodes to work out who dies. But there's so much of it that's enjoyable about it is in between those two poles about like someone dying and finding out who died. So you can find that in the mainstream, and you can find stuff in the margins. And the mainstream, the relationship to the mainstream and the margins is very different now in the sense that there's not really any common culture anymore. It's just like people really, just have their curated culture.
It's really interesting. And I think it's like one of those really bizarre things when you like see people rally against one thing or the other online, is that they're rallying against their own curated feed.
Yes.
It's like, you know, even though it wasn't really what they wanted to see, like they have unintentionally curated a frame of reference, and the frame of reference bounces back at them. It's like, everything is broken. Like, fuck this. And it's like, but they can't seem to comprehend that this is sort of not their doing, but it's like they're really a part of that ecosystem. You know, like the same with me. It's like, you know, like a number of the characters are like based on like pseudo celebrity socialists and stuff that I used to read, and then they like got to the point, like Nathan is just like this editor of this magazine overseas that really pissed me off at some point. And it's like, but I made that, like I brought him into my feed. I brought him into my life, and then it's a really interesting time to be a part of, I think.
Yeah, that's you chose this. Yeah, and that's a thing that in some ways, like I get that's sort of a tension in the book as well, that these people are sort of thrown together by certain material conditions or whatever, like they have to share house or whatever, but on some level as well they also chose to live with these people, you know, this specific house, these specific people, and you kind of have to I think a lot of people, especially of this political persuasion, fall back on that defense of like, oh, my life is this way because of these material conditions. And it's sort of a way to disempower yourself while also like rationalizing your behavior and your lifestyle.
Well, it's like you can always you always have a choice to not do something, but it has a consequence, you know, like You can choose to not live in a share house, but that means you would live outside your means, and like your savings account, you won't have one. You know, like
she's demolished, girl.
yeah,
She's not coming back.
Yeah. So it's sort of like that interesting sort of. I think it's really hard to be honest with yourself with stuff like this.
Mhm.
Like I inside my head complain about working full time all the time, but I like living in a house with my partner with no one else in it, and I like to be able to go drink 10 beers and not wake up in the morning like devastated that my bank account's empty. Like there are a lot of choices I make to be in this position. Previously I've like choose to like be a bartender and just like, you know, work 15 hours a week and fill the rest up with Centrelink and do all the like that sort of fucking run around and write in the other hours. And that sucked. I had a 10K credit card debt. So it's sort of like, yeah.
And it's stressful too. Like I have a lot of American listeners, so they probably don't really like their system is not as generous as ours in terms of like, but the thing with like the generosity of like of a welfare system is that it comes with a lot of fucking like life admin. Like you've got to go to meetings, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And like,
10
it's
jobs
stressful. It's
apply for 10 jobs.
Yeah. It's actually stressful. It's just easier to just have a job.
Yeah.
Like you make more money. Yes. Yeah, of course. But you make more money and then you can just be a little bit more comfortable and not like get into this spiral of, you know, like we were saying, debt and like, oh, but I'm creating. It's like, yeah. Reality, man.
Reality,
man. Love this book. I highly recommend it. For anyone that's in the US, can they get like a ebook or audiobook or something?
The ebook should be pretty accessible. There is like an audiobook, like the audiobook rights have been sold and it should be ready soon, but I don't know what's going on with it.
And that's usually available to the entire world?
Yeah, I think it's an Audible.
I mean, you can order it from the Geomondo website, but like the postage is probably crazy.
I think like you can get it through like ebooks.
Okay.
You know, there's always like some weird like bookseller who kind of like sends these packages over, but yeah, I'd say like maybe ebook or ebooks. But I have author copies too, so if like can email me, I'll sell it to you at cost.
Plus, there you go.
It'll still be expensive.
Again, yeah. It's a Getting Lit podcast special.
Exclusive.
Use promo code GLP.
Put it.
GLP does sound like some kind of anarchist communist organization. The GLP.
Surely somewhere. Georgian Liberation Party.
Okay, so and before we go, so part 2 of this, we're going to be discussing the 20 Days of Turin by Giorgio de Maria. And this is something that you suggested. Why did you suggest this?
Because I wanted to talk about a book I wanted to read. No, but I thought you'd find it interesting. Like it has like it's a kind of like a ghost story, or like it's a horror story. And it was tied in with like lots of like interpersonal suspicion, some kind of like allegory for like violent history under the bed of a city.
Yeah, nice.
It had like lots of like weird layers. It made me feel very uncomfortable.
It is an uncomfortable read, and it's very much a I don't know when it was written. Like
I think 70s.
70s, really? Okay, because it feels like an Italian version of that movement of New Weird. Have you ever heard of that? Like, yeah. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to talk about, and I'd be very interested to see the links to your book. There's Turin, I guess.
Yeah,
Turin,
I mean, like that's why how I found the book. It's like my friend posted about it, and like just the word Turin, because I was writing about Turin briefly, like sparked my interest.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, I thought it was also really I mean, we'll talk about it next time, but the way, like, it wasn't translated to English till like 2017. And then was sold as like this like post-Trumpian type thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it is at all. Like now that you've divorced that by like 5 years, it's sort of, yeah, I feel like it's really could be written at any time, and it's like this really interesting thing, but it couldn't be written now.
No,
like,
yes.
anyone could write that now without it being like insincere or something.
But yeah, anyway, that'll be part 2 when Max will rejoin me, and we'll talk about the 20 Days of Turin. If you want to track down that book, and maybe it's a pretty short book, so if you wanted to read it before next week, you can do that. Read along with us maybe, and then we'll talk about it. But yeah, Max, is there where can people find you if you want them to find you?
You can't find me. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm on Twitter. I don't use it very often, but just at Max Easton, I guess.
And you have a Substack too, don't you?
Oh yeah, I got a Substack,
Yeah.
which is in and out of activity, but mebarelyhuman.substack.
Yeah, I'll put those in the show notes anyway. And yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. And
Thanks,
yeah,
Matt.
we'll see you next week.
Yeah, chat to you then.
Yeah, chat to you then.
Mrs. Brown wakes up every morning. She takes the milk from her doorstep, puts on a pair of faded carpet slippers, and walks a painful mile to the laundrette. Her husband Jack is slowly dying. Asbestos poisoning has riddled him inside. He got his pension 6 years early. When it took away his job, they took away his pride. Mrs. Wilson sets her clock for 7 to see the children after school. She can't afford to give them breakfast, no, not at